thinking about key to an holistic approach to behaviour is looking and managing the environment, seeing the environment through the child's eyes and experience. Not waiting until we have the difficult moment, but minimising distractions in the environment, stopping that overload in the first place, keeping things at the right level, visually, sound-wise, smell-wise for your child. Minimising distractions, avoiding sensory overload. There's lots of things there we can spend a lot of time. I just want to draw your attention. Next time you go shopping, just stop for me and say, how does my child see this supermarket? Is that why I have so much, problems in this supermarket? For years we've given explanations like, oh, it's because he can't wait. He can't wait till you've done your shopping, and so he has challenging behaviour, therefore you come out the shop. And you've been told probably, classic advice, isn't it? Well, tell him that he's got to wait till Mummy's got 5 things and then he can have his Mars bar, and he still can't do that. Why? Because look at that picture there. When you're in that environment, there's all that information coming at you, plus sounds, plus smells, plus instructions, plus decision making, do I have binds, beans or whatever beans. And all of that is what's overloading the brain. It's not that they can't wait for the Mars bar necessarily, it's they can't cope with being in there. One young man says, it's not that I just can't understand the world, sometimes I can't stand the world. And it doesn't matter whether I wave your favourite thing in front of you. At that moment when you can't stand the world, you need to get out. You need to get out under the control of the adult. So we need to be picking up on that, saying, oh, I've had enough of this, let's go. The child does not therefore need to behave in that way that's challenging to get out of there. Well, that makes sense. Safe places is quite important, creating safe havens. Pop-up tents are brilliant if you've got kids who can't cope with the big wide world, or the big wide lounge, or the big wide kitchen, or the big wide bedroom. And you're reducing the input and a lot of other things as well. We're not going to cover everything, but we'll try a bit more. Supporting with stress and anxiety. Someone said one of the key features of Fragile X is stress and anxiety. It's one of the key features and that underpins most challenging behaviour in autism. And it's that constant stress. One young man years ago wrote a book on autism, one of the first books by a person with autism. And the opening chapter he says this, there's only one thing you don't have to teach people with autism. That's how to worry and be worried. We even worry about not being worried. Does that describe your child? Yeah. If you're constantly worried, constantly anxious, you are going to behave in ways that challenge other people as a way of getting out of that situation. The fear, the fight, the flight response. Recognise the strategies that your child uses to manage their worries, stress and anxiety. Sometimes when I go into schools, people say, well, he does this and this, and I say, well, that's great. That is a strategy for managing his behaviour. His stress level, say, oh, we can't do that in school. That's not acceptable. I'm saying, what's your choice? He's got a strategy that keeps his behaviour, keeps his stress levels to a certain level, therefore he can be in school. If we don't find a better strategy than he's got, he's going to be so stressed that he can no longer stay in school. He can no longer learn. Can you remember when you're learning? You learn best when you're relaxed or when you're totally stressed out. Anybody doing their driving having driving lessons at the moment? You notice how stress impedes our ability to learn even simple things. All he wants us to do is look in the mirror, and we can't even do that because we're so stressed and anxious. That's true for people with autism, true for people that you're living with, working with. So they'll have strategies that sometimes we see as problems. A good strategy if you're stressed is to flap. And very often, you can't have him flapping. What? There's 3 reasons usually for flapping. One reason is, look what's happening when I flap. If I'm really good at flapping, the whole of my upper body's moving, my neck's moving, my shoulder, I'm reducing my stress and anxiety. If someone says to you, put your hands in your pockets, Don't want you flapping in Marks and Spencer's. Put your hands in your pockets. What's on to my shoulders instantly? Tension, stress. Well, I'm not saying you let your kid flap everywhere. I'm saying you find something for those flappy hands to do that has the same effect on the brain. You find something within the supermarket. They might not like it, but let's shake the big bag of crisps, make sure it's full. You know, that's just the same as that, but nobody notices quite as much. And you'll be more creative than I am in those things. But we find something that achieves the same for the behaviour we find challenging or difficult. It's no use stopping the behaviour without we can work with the core reason for the behaviour. Recognise the strategies that they use. Make a list of all the strategies that your child uses to manage their stress. Can I develop them into something he can use, she can use later in life even, that will not draw attention but meet the needs? Provide ways of identifying provide ways for them to identify their own rising levels of stress and and give them strategies to manage it. They don't always know they're getting more stressed. And key to that is also, look, given ways of recognising that stress is rising, given ways of communicating it. If you want to look at, did a piece of work years ago, it's in a book called Understanding and Teaching Children with Autism by Jordan Powell, and it's the last chapter that explains some of the ways I've worked in the past for teaching people to recognise their anxiety, recognise their feelings, recognise their stress. And then you've got to communicate it. It's easier said than done, isn't it, when you're stressed, saying, I'm unhappy, I'm stressed. I like this. You might have seen a version of this, lots of schools use it, where they print it on a sheet of paper and you draw a circle of how you're feeling at that moment. Much better. What do you want? You want to be happy? I love that one. I was at a conference and this mum was there with her children. I'm guessing the children with autism were there because nobody would look after them. And this little lad came and joined me at the front. He got bored of listening. He mimicked me, or not mimicked me, he matched my behaviour. So when I did that and all the things I do, he did it. And we came to this bit and he touched that. And he looked up at his mum and said, Mum, 5-year-old kid, Mummy, that's how the inside of my head feels when I'm upset and angry. And she came to me after and said, you've never been able to communicate that. But because the visuals there. If you put this on, I will guarantee that your child, when I present this in schools, they say, oh, don't use it because they always pick the wrong ones. You have to learn. I've done this as an experiment. I've left it laying around. You know what? All you sensible people, I know what you pick. People do. You have to learn that it's about not just the sound, but communicating your feelings. Kids will have to be taught that and learn. It's not magic, but it's a way of saying, look, I'm anxious and this is how I'm feeling. And there's lots of other techniques that we could share with you if you were there for a day or two. But, key thing I want to get over is this. I believe a lot of behaviour we find difficult to manage, self-injurious behaviour, other challenging behaviours, because of where the child is emotionally and stress-wise. I want you to imagine, if you can see this see the stage, that this stage is the edge of the cliffs. Nearly had a good example of that. There's the edge of the cliffs. I believe that most of us live our lives out here. So when stress comes along, you stagger. When you can't pay the bill, you stagger. When the wife's angry with you, you stagger. When your husband's done that again, 1,000th time this week, you stagger. But where's the edge? You're still a long way to go before you're over the edge. Lots of people, lots of your children will live their lives here, just on the edge. The anxiety levels high, not understanding the world, the stresses. When things go wrong, it might be something quite small, Like I had a child last week getting very upset, having a major meltdown because he couldn't understand why McDonald's could give him a milkshake but they couldn't give him a glass of milk. There's no logic in that, is there? That wouldn't blow you off the edge. But if you're already on the edge, that's big, and I'm here. I have one way to go, haven't I? Two ways to go. I can either go over the edge emotionally and have those big meltdowns and real difficulties, or I can come away from the edge. But as I come away from the edge, if I have to come away from the edge, I have to create space. All those people, all those things that put me on the edge are there in front of me. So I have to use my behaviour that challenges to make the world move away to give you space. And that's when we get the more severe challenging behaviour. It's about getting away from the edge because I don't want to go over. Does that make sense? At that stage, when if you have children who have a real challenging behaviour, physical, emotional, and you want them to come away from the edge, I want to say this, it is okay to do whatever you need to do to bring your child away from the edge. If you want to give them a Mars bar, give them a Mars bar. Give them 2. Give them 3. Want to get fat? Yeah. But I can diet when I get him in a position where he can learn again, where he can manage his behaviour. I cannot work, you cannot change people's behaviour when they're so stressed that they're hanging over the edge. Where are you when your child's on the edge? I'll tell you where you are, right there next to them. Where's your emotions? Right up there. Is that a good place for either of you? You do what you need to do to come away from the edge sometimes. You do what you need to do some days to get through the day, because it's important that you come through the day as well as you possibly can, given that day from hell. Does that make sense to people? And sometimes as professionals in the past, we say, no, don't do that, you're setting a rod up for your back and all those things. I can deal with a rod on my back when me and my child's in a position where I can teach him new skills, where I can teach him to manage his stress levels, when I can reduce the stress levels, when without ear I can learn. There's very little learning goes on the edge of the cliff. And it's that kind of principle that I think is making a difference. When you give yourself permission to work with your child to lower their anxiety by whatever means is right at that moment for you and your child, without feeling guilty about doing that. Creating good places to be away from the edge. Good places depends upon your child. I just love that picture I found on the net with tent. That's a good place to be when you're anxious, worried, when the world's too much. Somebody says, yeah, but you can't use them very often. Yeah, you can. If you go in shopping, they cost £9.90 unless you're very rich and want a purpose-built one, and they're about 3,000 or something ridiculous. You buy one of them, £9.90, you put it in your shopping bag, your kid's having a major tantrum in the shopping centre, you get him out into the park round the corner, flip the tent up, bring him down. You get on without being injured. You said that people look strange. Look even strange if you've been beaten and sworn at, don't they? It's always that compromise kind of thing. Look at that. Sometimes people say relationships are not safe for people with autism. Look at the eye contact there. Look at the strength. That's a good place to be. Classroom's a good place. There's a jacket that provides deep pressure. Good place to be. Vestibular stimulation. Good place to be for that child at that moment. Is that a good place for that? Some people say, no, he's not communicating. Well, sometimes I need to cut myself off from my experience in the world in order to be able to cope with it. And I need to be allowed to do that as a person with autism, just like you. You ever cut yourself off so you can manage and not have those difficult behaviours? You ever take yourself to the bath and have a glass of wine and put the candles on rather than swear at your husband or your partner or whatever? You do those kind of things? Of course we do. The person with autism, person with fragile needs whatever they need in order to cope with that moment. And then they can regulate themselves. There's just so much, but I've got 2 minutes to pass on some other things.